Hello YouTube, it's Hollandtown here, and today I'm gonna be presenting you with the absolute best horror movie plot twists of all time, according to my own opinion, which is absolute law in my house when my wife is not around. Horror movies have been a fundamental part of my life ever since I accidentally rented Freddy vs. Jason back in 2003 because I thought it was a martial arts movie, and then proceeded to pretty much watch every single film in the horror section of our local video store, in the process reaching a higher state of being. With that being said, having watched a crapload of these flicks over the years, it is very rare for me to come across something that I find genuinely surprising and disturbing, and that's what this video is all about. Now, there are a lot of awesome horror movie plot twists across the decades of the genre's existence, but what I'll be focusing on are the twists that I felt came completely out of left field and which I truly did not see coming at all. On that note, it goes without saying that we're gonna be delving into very deep spoiler territory here, so if you haven't seen some of these movies and wish to do so, maybe skip those sections of the video and then come back and watch them once you're done with those films. And now, without further ado, let's examine the most unexpected horror movie plot twists to have ever plagued the silver screen. I'm going to kick things off with one of my favorite horror film anthologies, which I previously featured in my video of awesome horror movies to watch for Christmas. I'm talking, of course, about A Christmas Horror Story, which is essentially a collection of 4 short films interwoven together by an overarching narrative. The movie takes place in the sleepy town of Bailey Downs during the most wonderful time of the year, where we meet Dangerous Dan, a Christmas-loving radio host played by the awesome William Shatner. Dan references a food drive that will be happening down at the local mall, which will be hosted by a disgruntled employee of his, Norman the Weatherman, and as the festive music continues to play, we are progressively introduced to each one of the 4 stories that we will bear witness to, happening that very night. The first story follows 3 teenagers who decide to break into their school in order to investigate 2 student murders that happened there the year prior, and end up getting way more than they bargained for when they come across a supernatural entity. The second tale follows a police officer, his wife, and their son, who venture into the woods in order to chop down a tree which they will decorate for Christmas. During their excursion, they briefly lose sight of their child, and when they find him again, it's clear that something is wrong with him. The third story follows a dysfunctional family of 4 who are about to get a lesson on the existence of Krampus, and the fourth, and most original one, has Santa Claus dealing with a disease that is turning his elves into zombies. And that's where the twist comes into play. You see, Dan keeps receiving reports of some sort of disturbance down at the mall, which is a running mystery throughout the movie. In the meantime, as Santa struggles through an increasingly violent fight for survival, he eventually comes face to face with Krampus himself and engages him in mortal combat. However, as the bearded saint is about to kill his evil counterpart, it is revealed that Krampus is just a mall worker and the truth is laid bare. You see, the Santa we have been following is actually the aforementioned Norman dressed as one, whose intense work schedule caused his mind to snap and start seeing the mall goers and workers as zombified elves, which led to his rampage. After a brief moment of confusion, and just as the police arrive at the scene, Norman attempts to finish off his fallen victim as he is still trapped in his illusions, but his madness comes to an end after a hail of bullets, thus concluding this Christmas horror story. This next one is probably one of the most original and impossible to predict horror films I have ever watched, and I dare someone to tell me they had figured things out before everything was revealed halfway through the movie. We're talking about Barbarian, a film whose name definitely feels multi-layered once everything is exposed. Barbarian starts with a young woman named Tess arriving at a dark neighborhood in Detroit and parking in front of the Airbnb she has booked, only to find that a guy named Keith is already in it. Following an awkward conversation with the mysterious occupant, who claims that he also booked this particular Airbnb for that same night, Tess is convinced to stay there so that they can clear things up in the morning with the host. The night starts in a somewhat ambiguous way as Keith acts in ways that could easily be perceived as suspicious, but as time progresses, Tess warms up to him as she sees and appreciates the extent to which he goes to make her feel comfortable and safe, such as offering her the bed and taking the couch for himself to sleep, and also treating her to wine which she uncorks in front of her, with our female protagonist opening opening up to him even more once she realizes they have similar artistic interests, as she reveals she's there for an interview with a filmmaker he is familiar with. With Tess now significantly more relaxed, they say their goodnights, though there is a brief moment of awkward hesitation from Keith to probably see if he can score, and then go to sleep. Tess awakens during the night by something and is disturbed to find her door open. She jolts Keith awake, who was seemingly asleep, and he assures her that he didn't do it. The next day, Tess wakes up to find Keith missing, though he has left a note letting her know he will be back and wishing her well on her interview. Now outside in broad daylight, Tess is able to see how decrepit the neighborhood looks, with the Airbnb being the only house that's decent. Following a successful interview and a warning from her interviewer to leave the neighborhood, Tess returns to the Airbnb only to be chased inside by a hobo that screams at her to get out of the house. Still rattled, she goes to the bathroom and realizes there is no toilet paper, which leads her down the basement. After getting the prized roll, she tries to go back up only to realize that she's locked down there without her phone. With nothing to do but wait, she explores the basement and discovers a concealed rope which, once pulled, opens up a secret door that leads down a dark corridor. After managing to shed some light across its length, she decides to investigate a bit and discovers a creepy room with a camera aimed at a bed with a stained mattress, which kind of freaks her out. Keith returns and lets her out of the basement, but doesn't believe her about the room and decides to go check it for himself despite her protests. After failing to return, Tess decides to go find him, and that's when she sees another opening down the corridor which she hadn't seen before, leading deeper underground. Hearing him crying for help, Tess ventures down the stairs and eventually comes across a terrified Keith who tells her they're not alone down there, just as a massive naked creature comes and bashes his head in. What the hell? Well, turns out the whole first part of the movie was a distraction from the true horror that was brewing underground. You see, the house has a fucked up backstory, which involves a psychopath named Frank who was abducting women and keeping them in that shitty room as he forced himself on them, which resulted in the birth of children which he also abused in that way, with the final birth being that massive disfigured woman known as the mother. Jesus Christ, saying all that made me sick to my stomach. I wish I could tell you that Frank gets a painful death, but unfortunately, he manages to take the easy way out. God, I fucking hate that guy. Dead Silence is one of my favorite films of all time, despite a lot of people disliking it, and one of the main reasons for my adoration of it is its final twist. Dead Silence starts in an awesomely creepy way, with Jamie Ashen, our protagonist, and his wife Lisa having some cute moments at home when the doorbell rings and they open the door only to find an unmarked package. Curious, they open it and are met by a black case that contains a creepy ventriloquist dummy. Jamie goes out for a bit to grab some food, leaving Lisa alone, and that's when things turn spooky. Lisa props up the doll and covers it with a sheet in order to scare Jamie, who was very much creeped out by it, and as she moves away, the sounds around her get distorted and progressively muffled, aside from a creepy laugh that seems to be coming from the room where the doll is sitting under the sheet. Feeling rattled, Lisa approaches the doll and, just as she's about to touch it, is attacked and flung across the room before being pulled back in by an unseen figure. Jamie finally returns and, to his horror, discovers his wife's corpse on the bed. Jamie is arrested for the crime but soon gets released due to lack of evidence. He returns back home and searches the doll's box for some clue as to who would have wanted to harm his wife, and discovers a sign hidden behind the upholstery that references Mary Shaw, a deceased ventriloquist from his hometown of Ravens Fair. Wanting answers, Jamie decides to drive back to Ravens Fair, which looks completely dilapidated, and goes to visit his estranged father, Edward, who lives in an awesomely creepy mansion. He's greeted at the door by a woman named Ella, who introduces herself as his father's wife, but all Jamie wants is to meet with Edward, so he storms through and goes upstairs only to find Edward bound on a wheelchair. Ella quickly goes by his side to help him get his oxygen mask off and explains that he suffered a stroke a few months back. Edward tries to mend fences since he hadn't been the most attentive father, but Jamie is only interested in getting some information on an old scary rhyme about Mary Shaw that warned people not to scream if they ever saw her ghost. Edward dismisses it as superstition, but Jamie's convinced it's more than that, so he goes on an investigation of his own. As the film progresses, more and more disturbing facts are uncovered by our protagonist, including the fact that Mary Shaw was actually killed by his family many years back after she was suspected of having something to do with the disappearance of a child that was Jamie's uncle. Eventually, it is revealed that Mary's ghost does indeed exist, and that she actually killed the child she had been accused about in an effort to construct the perfect doll. It's also revealed that she wants vengeance against Jamie's family family due to her demise at their hands, and that she killed his wife because she was pregnant with his offspring. But that's not the twist. You see, near the end of the movie, Jamie goes back to his father's house where he has a brief confrontation with Mary and seemingly defeats her by throwing her doll in the fire. Just as his nightmare seems to have come to an end, Jamie notices his father sitting close by, but he's eerily still and quiet. As he moves to touch Edward, the man's body drops forward, revealing a gap across his back with a wooden pole where his spine should be, and finally our guy puts everything together. Jamie realizes the only time he had seen Edward moving and talking was when he had Ella by his side so she could use him as a human dummy, and as his mind works overtime, he realizes far too late that Ella was Mary's magnum opus, the perfect doll she struggled all her life to create. Needless to say, things don't end well for Jamie, who becomes the latest victim of Mary Shaw, thus concluding her vengeful mission. Technically speaking, Strange Darling leans more toward the crime thriller side of things, though I did find it horrifying and I thought its twist was masterful, so in the list it goes. The movie is told in non-linear fashion and starts by giving us a glimpse of this menacing dude before informing us that this is the story of a prolific serial killer that went on a rampage from 2018 to 2020. We then get a tense sequence of him chasing a woman down a rural road, with the girl clearly hurt and in distress. The hunter takes a shot at her car, which proceeds to flip, and she barely makes it out and flees into the woods as he goes on her trail. From that point on, the movie takes us back and forth between the present and the past, where we learn that these two actually met at a bar and then proceeded to the guy's truck and went to a motel for a one-night stand. During their conversation, the woman references the fact that, as a woman, it is very dangerous for her to do quickies with strangers and asks him if he's a serial killer, which he of course denies, and that apparently is enough to put her mind at ease somehow. As the movie keeps switching timelines, we see that in the present, the guy has reached an isolated house where the girl had sought refuge, and notice a man's corpse there, which belongs to a couple of doomsdayers that we got introduced to at some point, whom offered the girl assistance. He eventually finds her inside the freezer after shooting her through it in the arm, and then we move back to the past where we get an increasingly uncomfortable sexual encounter between the two in their motel room. Things seem to be escalating steadily there, with their one-night stand taking a dark turn when the guy binds her and proceeds to terrorize her verbally. Just as it becomes near unbearable to watch, the woman says her safe word and it is revealed that this was all part of a roleplay they had previously agreed on. The movie jumps to when the girl asked the doomsdayers for help, and after a brief discussion they suggest that calling the cops would be the best course of action. The girl seems very much against that, and when the man proceeds to try anyway, she decides to stop him by bashing his head in with the phone and stabbing him in the heart. What the hell just happened? Moving back to the past, the woman asks the guy if he would be open to snort some snow, if you catch my drift, which he reluctantly agrees to, and that's when things begin to clear even more as we see her preparing his dose, which she switches with a different powder. After he snorts the stuff, her demeanor changes abruptly and she becomes cold and condescending. With the mood ruined, the guy proceeds to leave but doesn't make it very far since he goes limp and drops to the floor just outside the room. The woman drags him back in, and the twist finally hits you like a ton of bricks as she reveals herself to be an infamous serial killer known as the Electric Lady, who has been killing men after luring them to motels with the promise of sex. From that point on, everything is put in perspective as we learn that our guy is actually a police officer, even though the movie did an absolute banger of a job setting him up as the serial killer, and he's hunting her to bring her in after their unfortunate meeting. We also get to see her whole rampage as she runs for dear life from him in full survival mode until her eventual demise at the end, which, I have to admit, was less satisfying than I thought it would be given how much I was rooting for her to get what she deserved after I learned of her true nature, and felt more like the sad demise of a mentally unwell person, since her explanation for doing what she was doing was that, at times, she saw demons instead of people, a reference that reflects a previous scene where, for a moment, she seems to be shocked while looking at the guy's face, which is revealed to be her reaction when witnessing the demonic faces. Overall, a fantastic film and a masterclass in direction and, to be fair, misdirection as well. Little Bone Lodge is one of those movies where you kinda think you know where it's headed, and you may be right to a point, but then it just gets so much worse and it makes you feel like shit. The movie starts by introducing us to a small family of 3, living a quiet, rural life in an isolated place during a stormy night. The mother seems like a strong, capable woman, which she needs to be given that she's not only responsible for her young, sheltered daughter, but also her husband, who is suffering from an illness that keeps him willbound and catatonic. Tonight is actually the man's birthday, which they celebrate by making him a nice cake and giving him some handmade cutlery with bone handles, crafted by the mother herself. However, their joyous occasion is quickly interrupted by frantic knocking at their door and someone asking for help. The mother checks through the peephole and sees a crying man pleading for someone to save his brother, who is lying by his feet with an iron bar sticking out of his gut. Taking pity on them, the woman opens the door, brings them in, and proceeds to stitch up the unconscious man. The movie goes on to show us that the conscious brother is somewhat mentally unstable and socially awkward, hinting at him potentially becoming a threat. The mother inquires about the circumstances that led the 2 men here, but the guy becomes increasingly cryptic and uncomfortable the more she prods. That's when the other brother swoops in after having regained consciousness, just in time to make some weak excuse for their appearance there as them having had an accident while going on a fishing trip. As the movie progresses, it becomes clear that the 2 brothers were involved with some criminals and ended up in a car accident due to the younger brother's stupidity after he got into a fight with the 3rd guy in the car. The older brother wants to get back to the accident site, since there's a bag full of money there that he needs to get, so he makes up an excuse and asks the woman to drive him there, which she reluctantly agrees to do after she locks the younger brother in a room to make sure her daughter stays safe. At the accident site, she notices the 3rd guy dead inside the car, which forces the older brother to drop the facade and threaten to harm her and her family if she doesn't follow his orders. It is from here on out that we start getting a glimpse of something being very off about the mother, who doesn't seem to be as scared of the guy as you would expect her to be. Returning to the house with all pretenses dropped, the man explains that they'll be leaving tomorrow morning, so as long as everyone behaves, this nightmare will be over soon. At the same time, the mother becomes increasingly worried about giving the father his medication. Just as she's about to give her husband his medicine, the police arrive outside, which sends the brothers in survival mode. The older sibling tells the woman to get rid of the cop quietly or they'll be hell to pay. She answers the door and the officer explains that they are checking all places in the area due to a manhunt for the brothers. As they're discussing, the mother excuses herself for a moment in order to close a shutter that's been banging upstairs, and that's when the man notices a torn photo of a young girl with the husband apparently healthy. The willbound man seems as if he is trying to say something to the officer, but is interrupted just as the woman returns. As she's escorting the cop to the exit, he turns to her and asks about the girl in the photo. Turns out he recognized her as a child that went missing during a summer several years ago. Just as she's fumbling for some excuse, the father finally manages to utter the word help. And from that point on, the shit hits the fan for the rest of the movie, starting with the death of said cop after she shoots him following a scuffle he had with the older brother. Now, here we get 2 twists. The first one, which I thought was disturbingly solid, was that, as you can understand, this woman is not the girl's actual mother, but the black guy is indeed her real father. You see, years ago, the girl's real mother was involved in a car accident with this mother, which ended up in this mother losing her husband and child. Thus, she proceeded to abduct the real father along with the girl when she was just a baby to make them her new family. But that's not the truly horrific twist. At some point in the film, the older brother is skulking about on the first floor and comes across a dark room full of monitors and someone lying on a medical chair in front of them. As he nears, he discovers a mutilated but still living woman lying on the seat, and that's when things turn fully depressing. You see, this woman is the girl's real mother, whom the other woman also abducted and not only forced her to watch through the monitors at her husband's ordeal and her daughter's blissful ignorance, but also used her bones as the material to craft a variety of different tools, including those she gifted to the husband, hence the mutilations. And you know what the worst thing is? In the end, the psychotic mother not only gets away with all of it, but manages to imprison the older brother and make him her new plaything. Man, this movie made me feel miserable. Run shares thematic similarities with the aforementioned Little Bone Lodge through its exploration of a mother-daughter relationship, though it goes about its horror element with a more slow-burn approach, which, in my humble opinion, makes it all the more terrifying. The movie starts with a woman named Diane who is wheeled inside a hospital room to meet her newborn daughter, who has been born prematurely and is being kept alive inside an incubator. We then cut to a school meeting 17 years later, where various parents, including Diane, are discussing how they are coping with the fact that their children will be leaving for college in a few months, and while other parents are sad since they don't want to be separated from their kids, Diane seems incredibly supportive and says that even though they haven't heard back from any colleges yet, she will be very happy to see her daughter Chloe go out and live her life to the fullest. It is then revealed that Chloe is a paraplegic and suffering from various health conditions due to her premature birth, including arrhythmia, hemochromatosis, asthma, diabetes, as well as leg paralysis, which force her to take several pills per day and also have her moving around in a wheelchair. We get a glimpse of how challenging her daily life is as she medicates, as well as how great her relationship with her mother is, who is also homeschooling her and doesn't allow her access to any technology, including phones, though we do see that Chloe is a passionate, self-taught engineer, proving her brilliance. One day, Chloe decides to sneakily check out her mother's groceries in search of chocolate, and discovers a box of green pills with Diane's name plastered across it. When Chloe inquires about it, her mother explains that her name was on the receipt, which was looped around the box, not on the box itself, even though Chloe knows what she saw. The next day, Chloe has a look at the box again and does indeed see her own name plastered over it, but upon closer examination, she discovers that her name has been pasted over her mother's name, and the plot thickens. That same night, Chloe fakes taking the pill and then skulks down from the first floor in order to get to the house's desktop computer. She tries to research the name of the drug, which is called trigoxin, but the internet has been cut off, and as she leans back in disappointment, we get an ominous view of her mother's shape watching her from the shadows. The following morning, in a desperate attempt to uncover the truth, Chloe proceeds to call a random number over the phone and ask the stranger that answers to search for the drug online. The guy reluctantly does so and tells her that trigoxin is indeed meant to treat heart conditions. However, he also tells her that trigoxin is a red pill, not a green one, and the plot thickens even more. At this point, Chloe is stressed beyond belief, and she devises a plan in order to finally understand what's happening. She proceeds to ask her mother for a night at the movies, which Diane obliges to. They both drive into town, and during the movie, Chloe excuses herself by saying she needs to go to the bathroom, but actually goes to the local pharmacy instead. There, she asks about the name of the green pills she has been ingesting, and after some convincing, the pharmacist tells her that the pills are dog medication called lidocaine, a muscle relaxant meant to treat leg pain for canines, and if a human were to take them, their legs would go numb. Just as Chloe starts hyperventilating from the revelation, her mother comes in and sedates her, and from that point on, things get horrifically serious. Chloe wakes up in her room, which has been creatively locked by her mother, and after some challenging acrobatics, she manages to get out of the house and re-enter from her mother's window, but when she tries to go down the stairs, she realizes the cord for the wheelchair elevator has been cut. After a painful drop down the stairs, she notices she can wiggle her toes, which is a result of her not taking the lidocaine pills for the past few days. Managing to escape the house, given that her mother is absent on an errand, she wheels down the road and comes across a mailman she knows, at which point she asks for assistance. Unfortunately for Chloe, her mother drives down the road just in time to find them, and after unsuccessfully trying to convince the mailman that she is no threat to her daughter, Diane ends up giving him a lethal injection, thus cutting Chloe's hope short. Shortly after, Chloe awakens inside the house basement, and after searching around a bit, the horrific truth is revealed. First, she finds several acceptance letters from colleges she had applied to, meaning her mother had been hiding them from her. She then discovers a box full of documents and photos, including an image of herself running, proving that she used to be healthy, as well as a death certificate for a baby girl named Chloe, who died 2 hours and 11 minutes after her birth. Finally, she finds a printout of a news article reporting on a baby abduction that happened around the same time as baby Chloe's passing, and we officially have all the pieces of this terrifying puzzle. Turns out, the baby we saw at the start of the film wasn't the Chloe we have been following, but Diane's actual baby daughter, who never made it past the first few hours of her birth. Unable to cope with the loss, Diane abducted a random baby girl and raised it as her own, keeping the child isolated from the outside world both out of fear of being discovered, but also out of some twisted belief that she needed to protect
protect Chloe from everyone. The good news is that Chloe ends up being the winner of her nightmarish fight for survival against her mother that ensues following this revelation, with the film ending as she visits a bedridden Diane at a correctional facility in order to give her lidocaine and keep her paralyzed and unable to speak as a form of revenge, all the while talking about her increasingly successful life. The bad news is that despite how dreadful Diane's actions were, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of sorrow for her, given the circumstances that led to them. All in all, a masterful horror thriller with fantastic pacing and incredible performances.
And that's it, ghouls and gals. These were the absolute best horror movie plot twists of all time, according to the opinion of yours truly. Do leave a comment below about your own favorite horror movie plot twists, but please include the name of the movie at the beginning of said comment to keep yourselves from spoiling it for people that haven't watched it yet. Until next time, stay spooky!